neglected to read this component, so I will just read what it says here, that we are confirming the determination of the Corps of Commissioners to continue to meet electronically because meeting at a physical location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at that anchor location. So hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda and also review the minutes from the listening session of January 28th. They weren't meeting minutes, but they were minutes of the January 28th listening session. So I'm not sure how many were present, but just want to see if there's any additional information that might be missing, or any edits to the way that the document is written, or relating to the comments that were presented.
This is relative to the minutes of the listening session.
Yes.
I read them over. I thought they were pretty accurate.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there are no additional comments or edits, is there anyone objecting to the acceptance of these minutes as they are presented? Okay, seeing no objections, we have consensus / unanimous approval of these minutes for January 28th. Thank you very much. I'll give public comment just a little bit of time to maybe solidify if people are jumping on for public comment. Next up on the agenda is, well, before I go to number 4, just want to comment. I spoke with Lieutenant Zayas this afternoon, and she commented that as far as she knows, all of the officers have done everything they need to do for the Partner Pair program, as well as I believe the commissioners in communicating with Coletta. But it's, I think the officers understanding that now the onus is on the commissioners to reach out to them. If I'm incorrect in that, please let me know. But just so you know, commissioners, if you in fact did join or want to be a part of the program and select an officer to pair with, they're waiting for your phone call or your email to solidify that first meeting. So please make sure that you reach out because they're waiting for you. Is that correct, Ms. Lynch? Is that the expectation?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So any questions from any of the commissioners on that, or anybody missed the deadline and still want to jump in? Okay, make a phone call, send an email, send a text, and you can do the Partner Pair. Next up is the city update from the mayor's staff. So I don't see Rachel, but is someone else prepared to offer an update? Oh, there's Rachel. Thank you. So update from the mayor. Rachel, take it away.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Thank you, as always, for giving us a chance to give you an update. It's my understanding that tonight you wanted a specific update on the hiring of the Chief Equity Officer. Is that still accurate?
I believe so. At least one component, unless there's any other particular questions, yes.
Okay, I'm happy to try to address anything else that you might need. I apologize. I've been running from meeting to meeting today. So the Chief Equity Officer is a position that has been a priority for the mayor based on some work that we did last year when we were transitioning into office with Mayor Mendenhall. I think, as you all know, one of her priorities coming into office has been to elevate equity citywide, both internally in how we do business and externally with how our residents are able to access opportunities and live in the city. So last year, as I mentioned, we assembled a transition team committee of really remarkable community members, and they provided us with several recommendations on both geographic equity and just generally equity, inclusion, and belonging. One of those recommendations was to create a citywide equity plan. We secured funding to do that last year, and that process was kicked off earlier this year. We had a lot of input from the community, including the transition team members and beyond, on the scope of work that will go into that citywide equity plan. So in tandem with that process, we have been desiring to elevate a policy advisor position in the mayor's office to kind of retitle and reclassify that position to chief equity officer. So that person, when we finalize the hiring, will be at the senior staff level, reporting directly to the mayor. And this person will essentially be working across all departments to shepherd the development and implementation of the citywide equity plan. That position was put out into the world, and the criteria and the scope of work, or the job description, and all of those accompanying materials were also vetted through the transition team committee last year, or that committee that we had assembled last year. We had a lot of interest in the position. I think we gathered over 60 applications for that position, which closed a couple of weeks ago. We have been working through evaluating those applications. 20 applicants advanced to a second round, and the conclusion of the evaluation of that second round is happening now. And I think 8 candidates will be interviewed in the next couple of weeks. So we're working on scheduling interviews for that position in the next 2 weeks. We're involving a couple community members in those interviews, so scheduling is challenging, of course. But we're really excited about the potential for this person to be a lead on the citywide equity plan, and really to foster that process and to ensure that we have somebody at the mayor's office level who's making sure that the equity plan is something that gets adapted and implemented across the city. So I'm sure you have questions. I hope that gave you at least a quick overview of where we're at in that process.
Commissioners? Thank you, Rachel.
The candidate that you had, did you have a diversity of candidates? And is there diversity included in the finalists?
Yes, thank you, Pastor Davis. We, I think, got an incredibly diverse array of candidates, and that includes people who have moved on to this final round.
And Rachel, maybe I missed it. Are there community members either that have been involved in the vetting of the applications, or that are still involved in the hiring process?
Yes, so we had community members who weighed in on the first evaluation of all 62 applicants, and how we were, like what metrics we were using to evaluate each of those applications. And then we'll have community members sit in on the interview process as well. We did not have community members at the stage of reviewing the second round, which was kind of a short answer essay question response, mainly because it's just a lot of time to ask from people who have very busy schedules. So they will be involved in the in-person or the in-Zoom interviews that we'll have with the finalists. This, I should mention too, I apologize for being disjointed on this, but this person will also oversee the city's Human Rights Commission and help us really create a new vision for how to elevate the Human Rights Commission in the city to make sure that there's a clearer process in place for how that commission actually evaluates decisions that the city makes. I think right now, this is similar to our priorities around sustainability, where too often I think it does become sort of it's a stop on the bureaucratic train when we are making decisions, but we want it to be we want that process to be infused and informed by the community members who sit on the Human Rights Commission, and make sure that, their valuable insight is really informing us in the way that it should. And I think that is going to require this person to help us create a new vision for how that commission really works in the city.
Is there an expected role in relation to this commission while it's still in panel?
I think I think that's a great question, and I would love to hear the commission's recommendations on that and on that interplay, particularly as we get to the end of this first year in the commission's work. And as we start working towards how this commission lives beyond the first year, knowing that the work is, ongoing, and knowing that city staff is here to support this work and make sure that we continue doing all that needs to be done. I think that this new role will have a lot of the administrative responsibilities for making sure that this commission functions and is used in the way that you all would recommend going forward.
Yeah, that was my question, kind of dovetailing on that. I see a number of the recommendations that we're making as a body being made in general way with the expectation that they'll be implemented with an equity lens, ensuring that the integrity of that intent is in place. And is this chief equity officer the person that would be able to put the eye on that policy? And if so, is that expectation being captured in the hiring process, or could it be addressed in the interview?
Commissioner Angie Reardon, I don't think that was a specific question that has been asked of this person yet, but I think it's absolutely appropriate to do that during the interview process, and would welcome any recommendations you all have, as I said, about the next or the ongoing iteration of this commission and how it works within the structure with the chief equity officer.
And I think if we could come to an agreement on that, that'll help us make our recommendations also, ensuring that it's just my opinion, so others can chime in, of course, but knowing that there's that full-time position in the city, they can have that oversight to ensure that the intent of those policies are put into place. That's my thought. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. And I would add that this person we're working on how to assemble an actual team for this person, an interdepartmental team. So this is, as you look at models in other cities, there's a bigger structure at play. This isn't one person. It's beyond the work of one person. So that's something that we're looking in each department to figure out. Do we have a liaison between, the mayor's office and specific people in each department? Do we assemble more of a departmental structure under this person? So all of those things, obviously take some budget and they take some time and they take some reconnoitering on the human resources level. But the work is, it's not just hiring this one person and then being done.
Yeah.
That is very good to hear.
Yeah, and just as an FYI, Rachel, when I held the position in Portland, which was the third one in the country, I had a staff of 9. Some of those were ADA because we also oversaw ADA issues, but several were for training. I had an executive assistant, and so there was a particular staff dedicated to doing this work and liaising with all the other city agencies.
Right. Thank you.
Rachel, you mentioned a report, an equity report, I think. Have we had access to that? Just wondering.
That Commissioner Prospero is the consultant, just came on board for working on that citywide equity plan maybe about a month ago. So that process was just launched. So no, you don't have a report, but I know that the consultant, well, I'm guessing that the consultant will want to involve the commission in the development of recommendations and evaluation.
Yeah, because I could really see us working together. And if there was some kind of plan already, I'd like for us to be able to make sure that we're supporting whatever plan that y'all are coming up with. And when it comes to equity, I'm assuming there's all kinds of groups, not just racial, ethnic groups, but a whole diverse amount of groups. Is that correct?
Sure. And in the mayor's office currently, we have a liaison, basically an ADA liaison, and so that person, works specifically with with a commission that she essentially looks specifically at access to city facilities for differently abled people. That person will work under the chief equity officer. Our liaison for New Americans will work under the chief equity officer. So, it's not one thing, but we don't have the entire structure in place yet.
Thank you.
One of the other questions that I'd like to ask Rachel is, will there be a person on this staff dedicated to policing issues and equity and fairness in policing?
Beyond the staff that we've already dedicated to this commission, do you mean?
Right.
Or?
Right. Since you're hiring this person and this person will have a staff, will there be somebody on that staff that's dedicated specifically to policing related issues?
Commissioner Davis, I think that we want to continue providing as much staff support, if not more, to this commission. Part of the reason I'm hesitating is that we not knowing exactly what this commission will look like going forward, after this first year, and not knowing exactly what the chief equity officer's vision will be for building up a staff and supporting both the Human Rights Commission and this commission. I'm not 100% sure what that will look like, but I do want to commit that, we will continue dedicating at least as many staff resources to this commission as we have been, and likely more. So I hope that starts to help answer your question. I'm not trying to be cagey on purpose, though.
All right, thank you.
What does it mean to be cagey?
The special attorney word.
Commissioners, anything else? Tentative start date, Rachel? Is there one?
No, sir. As I said, we'll be doing interviews in the next couple of weeks, and I think the start date will largely be dependent on the ultimate candidate.
Yep.
We're ready to start whenever that person is.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much for that update and all that information. It certainly is an important position for the city at large, no question about it, as well as just internally for the staff and certainly for the commission's work. So best wishes on the best selection possible.
Thank you
all. Number 5 is a discussion about the fiscal year 2022 police budget. I was going to just see several of the core commissioners met with Matrix, I think over the last week or so, and we're just going to see if they wanted to offer some thoughts in that conversation that they had with Matrix specific to that budget conversation.
I got some information. I don't know if any of y'all that also joined have it. I took a couple of notes. One of the main things they were talking about is, I don't know if it's recommendations or what they would call them, but they were talking about like a disciplinary matrix, which for me sounded very similar to like a sentencing matrix, in that to try to be more equitable when it comes to discipline of officers who may have a broken policy or whatever, is to have kind of like, it sounded like the higher the severity, the higher the sanction, but at the same time there'd be some other kind of mitigating or aggravating circumstances that make the discipline either get worse or lower. And I was happy to hear that, because it provides at least some guidance, some guidelines, so like that, then we could the department could then follow that, and then also could the public and us could look at it and see if those are being followed. The issue of having aggravating circumstances as well as mitigating is then there's the human bias that can come in and say, oh, poor little Stevie boy, he's had a hard life, and let's just do this versus there's Mo Bro with a big afro, he's a mean guy, and so let's get them more aggravating. So bias could still come in, but at least having that matrices, I think is really nice to have. I would like to see it. I did ask if that was, yes.
Well, Commissioner, if I could ask you to hold that thought, I appreciate that. The question was about matrix consulting and the
Yes.
budget, not the disciplinary matrix for the department at this point. So,
Yes, well, that's what they talked to us about.
oh, they did.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm missing the budget connection, but okay.
Oh, so you think these AirPods don't work?
Yeah, the fro
Yeah,
was
and that's
stuck
why.
in the ear.
Yeah, it's that wax coming out again. And that's why I said, I don't know what you would call it. And so these are some of the recommendations.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was a little bit with what you just said, how does that tie with the budget?
Right.
And so they said that they're using best practice that they've seen in other places, but of course they're tweaking it according to Salt Lake City, not just bringing stuff from other places.
Okay.
They also talked about which fell right in with our recommendations from the past about funding. They called it civilian paraprofessionals or community service officers. So basically non-sworn, and so it goes along with our CIT recommendations of bringing social works, also with the PYP of bringing social workers to work more with law enforcement and to address some of those issues that really law enforcement shouldn't deal with, or at least have somebody there to support that have those types of skills. And so that I did see the connection with the budget. They also talked about having possible civilian leadership for internal affairs. They've seen that in other cities. I don't remember. I don't know Nicole or anybody else that was on that meeting if they said that was a recommendation or something they were thinking about. And then lastly, what I have written is funding for police mental health wellness, which I think something we definitely were. I know I was going to start pushing for, basically to address some of the issues, some of the trauma that officers have been dealing with, and make sure that they are getting the services that they need, so like that. They're a good place when they're out there working with community. So those are the 4 things that I have, including the matrix for matrices. Matrices for matrix. One of those.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll try to follow you.
And Commissioner Prospero, I thought it was going to be a recommendation to have civilian leadership for internal affairs. That's what I remember. I may be misremembering though, but I seem to remember it was going to be a recommendation.
I think Rachel's going to come in and tell us what it really is.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I just wanted to make sure you all know that we are currently hiring for that position, and it is a civilian position. Police experience will obviously be valuable, but it will be a civilian employee. Also, since I already butted in, I will say that it is also a priority in our office to make sure that the full-time mental health on-site person is accessible and in the budget for fiscal year 22 in the police department. That's a big priority for us.
Great, thank you.
Rachel, would you be able to explain the disciplinary matrix in the budget discussion?
Sorry, say that again.
Because Dante got mad at me, and so I wanted to see if you're able to explain the disciplinary matrix. How does that fit in the budgetary discussion?
I am not qualified to talk about matrices of matrices at this moment, but I'm happy to try to figure that out for you. I can.
Let the minutes reflect that this is the most meta meeting of this commission that I've ever attended.
Did anybody else remember us talking about that in the meeting, or was I making stuff up again?
I recall in the scope of work of the Matrix group prior to them writing matrices, that the audit of the internal affairs unit was a part of their responsibilities. Sounds like they made some recommendations
I see.
in that vein, and I like that idea of setting a standard for action for consistency, but no two events are the same. So those aggregating and mitigating. Well, I agree with you, Dr. Prospero. This human factor, it also clarifies that just policy violation is not always the same. And details in that.
I agree with you, Chief Angie Weird.
Oh man, do that.
I'm gonna break
And
your
if
leg.
I could just jump in briefly, Dante, sorry. I just wanted to confirm Steve's understanding that the scope of the matrix, the request that the council made to matrix, now you've got me all tongue-tied, includes the internal affairs. They cast a pretty wide net, so it's not simply budget things. I also wanted to point out, I believe they are on, matrix is on the meeting agenda for the 21st to give a sort of overview. So that might be a good time for these kind of questions as well.
Great. Thank you, Allison. And just maybe just a point of information for folks, to the last, I think, comment Commissioner Prospero made about kind of health and wellness, mental health and wellness for police officers. And I don't know the data for the last couple of years, but historically, police officers as a profession have had the highest suicide rate in the country. So that just speaks to the trauma that they deal with on a daily basis. Any other thoughts on the meeting with Matrix and the budget conversation, or wherever else the conversation went?
With
Commissioner Powell?
Pardon me, with the funding for the health and mental illness for officers, would someone be able to explain the current funding for their medical and what would need to happen to make sure that happens? I just want to be careful because I think we should pay, like you're saying, a lot more attention to that. But I'm wondering if also too within the profession, if officers would always want to go accept the resources they're being offered. So perhaps making it a requirement that they have to complete maybe a month or a week's worth of just checkups with the specialist to make sure they're okay. That maybe is a little different from the department because I think there's a community perspective in that interdepartmental perspective that may not necessarily coexist with high critical incidents. Chief Brown, I'd love your insight on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Powell. We've discussed that. As right now, commissioners, we don't require officers to go to have a mental health check-in, so to speak. There are agencies that do. We've discussed it. It may be something that we look at in the future. Our priority right now is to get a mental health clinician in our building, in our police department, walking the halls, talking with officers, someone they can trust and they can go, seek the help they need to. I think there would be quite a few that would actually reach out and accept this help and from that professional. But it's not out of the scope to have officers go in and meet with somebody on an annual basis just to check in. Some assignments, just to let you know, officers that see a lot and deal with special victims, crimes against children. things that really are hard to take and can be very impactful in your life. Many times they will require those detectives and those officers to go in and to have those check-ins just to make sure they're doing okay. So we would first like to get that clinician here, and second, we'll look about how we roll that out and make it more robust. But thank you, Commissioner Powell. That's a good comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would also like to attribute having a clinician would perhaps be a much more proactive and meaningful way for officers to feel open to engaging with a mental health professional via maybe necessarily making it a requirement that might shut people down. So thank you, Chief, for that insight.
Anything else in that regard?
I was back at Unified. We dedicated a year of training in various areas of wellness to our officers, and discovered that a lot were suffering silently, and that's unhealthy for them and their families and for each other. But it can also be unhealthy for the community if officers are not approaching the community with their own level of mental health in good condition. Makes it harder to take on the trauma from the community. And I think that's a direct connection to the work that we do on this commission. And so I think making that connection can be something that maybe we can look at further as a commission. I know we're running out of time. We got a lot of items on the table, so maybe for the future that makes sense. I also want to support the chief, and I hate to do it because I don't like to say anything good about him because everybody's so nice to him all the time. But I actually do support what he's saying, because that model is really effective if your clinician is present in building relationships with officers in a comfortable way. Officers, yes, the suicide rates are high and the trauma is high, but also the resistance to get help is also high. And so if you can build that relationship and then get the trust where that conversation between officers is, hey, you know what, I went to see him and it was really helpful and I think you should too. And in the same way, like we recommend that our school resource officers go through the school and get to know the kids. That way they can recognize when there's a problem. Hey, Mo is happy-go-lucky 9 out of 10 times I see him, and that 10th time is something's wrong. Maybe I'll take him aside and say, hey, let's talk about this. But you know that you can be proactive through building those relationships. And I think that is an outstanding way to get started and a good way to bridge what Commissioner Powell was talking about too, where it's not mandatory, but it's way more welcoming and way more likely to accept the help under those circumstances. So for what it's worth, I really like that model.
Commissioner Andrew Warden, that's the nicest thing you've ever said about me. Thank you. But yes, thank you, Commission, for actually addressing this topic, because it's very important. You know, what we're trying to do is, for many years, there have been officers that have kind of suffered in silence. The last thing you ever wanted to do is let people know that you had a chink in your armor. You know what I mean? But over the years, and I think the military kind of showed us that it's okay not to be okay. And, you know, we see many of the things that our military friends see in battle, and we see it consistently. So this is a good program, and I think it'll pay huge dividends within our organization to help people heal from the things they see and better serve the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Okay, next up, we're moving through this agenda quite well. Seems like it's more of a update meeting than a working meeting, but I think it's still really, really beneficial. Next up is a continuing conversation. Last time we started a conversation around community engagement and what does it mean? And does the commission have an overall definition of community engagement that it would like to put forth? And we put up some examples on the screen and other things. And in conjunction with that, in the training subcommittee, and I think in one of the other subcommittees, there was a conversation around community engagement and what that means and what it looks like and or what it feels like from the police and from the community. And so on some level, I think there's a disconnect on what some of those expectations are. And so just wanted to, Larry was going to kind of lead us in the next conversation around community engagement. Does the commission want to solidify a definition or at least a description of what it looks like, or maybe not? And I'll also say that in some conversations with folks, trying to get the best engagement from the police officers is certainly my personal goal, but I hope it's also the commission at large. And I think there are some things that inhibit that. Chief Doubt suggested maybe just command staff on a call might be inhibiting that, and he would be willing to step back. Or the fact that the subcommittee meetings are recorded might be inhibiting that. And so as much as we can sit and say, well, they should be able to feel comfortable and just say what they believe, we also want to make that most available for them to do. So I'm thinking out loud at this point of the best way to maybe move into how do we best have the engagement of everybody on the subcommittee. So I'll just pause and let Larry take us into this conversation.
I appreciate it, Dante. And I think what's so interesting about working in community engagement, as I have now for the past 12 years, is the remarkable number of different ways that phrase gets interpreted, and the number of other phrases that are also used to mean something similar to, if not identical to that. So I've heard community involvement, I've heard public involvement, I've heard public engagement and public participation, I've heard civic participation, you name it. And what's interesting about community engagement in particular is that that's the phrase that I used in my work for most of my career. But I've also seen, for example, philanthropic efforts be called community engagement, or efforts for, say, an officer to participate in a youth sports league to be talked about as community engagement. So just to be clear on what I'm saying here, the way that I have thought about this is an opportunity for the community to influence, to engage with in conversation and influence the decisions and actions being made by some sort of entity, in this case, the police department. Having said that, there are plenty of other ways that the police department can engage with the community, whether it be attendance at community events, hiring related, activities and recruitment, again, participation in community programs and efforts at service and volunteerism. So Dante, I don't know if I'm taking us too far afield here, but I think that there are really a plethora of different ways that we can think about this one simple two-word phrase. And I personally, given what I do for a living, think it's very important that there be some space held for the part of engagement that really does deal with engaging in dialogue about the best way to protect our community. But there could be room for other ways that engagement can occur. So Dante, does that help with a frame, do you think, for the way that we should have this conversation?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess there's sort of at least two threads to this conversation. And I also want to honor the fact that I know Commissioner Shiflett has a hard stop, so I might turn to her first, given that. But I want to honor the fact that there's kind of a question as to whether this commission should define or offer a definition of community engagement as part of its recommendations, and then separately what that definition might look like. I also want to say, and I know we've experienced this on this commission, that actually wordsmithing and writing something as a group of however many we are here, 30, is a tall order. But I think what we're after is a set of concepts that then a subgroup can put into words, that would spell out a definition. So Commissioner Shiflett, let me turn to you just because of I know your schedule tonight, and just get any thoughts you may have on this.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the question, when you said community engagement, are we talking about community policing, just using different language? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that I am the final say. It just means that I am seeing this in a broader, in some respects, a broader context to include things like assisting the community with things that are important to it, having a presence in the community to assist in ways that may seem non-traditional, but also to solicit the community's input and feedback on how best to protect and serve. That's my conceptualization of it. That doesn't mean it needs to be this commission's.
Okay, because I think when we talked before, and correct me if I'm wrong, we looked up the government definition of community policing, and I thought we talked about the things that you just listed. You know, community policing, whether it's community engagement, is involving the community in the decisions, having them get to know the people in the community, and it's a two-way street. But correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, before I have to get off, but I thought it was the same thing, and maybe that was in our small meeting, I'm not sure.
No, I think that was a full commission conversation, and I'm remembering it now and seeing it the way I think you're seeing it. So it could be that maybe this is just an offshoot or just a facet of what that conversation was all about.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
In our small meetings, you know, the gentlemen that join us, they always say language is everything. So that's why I was just trying to determine the terminologies that we were using. So thank you.
Of course. I want to flag that Commissioner Powell has helpfully posted a link to some material from the city of Seattle in the Zoom chat. Commissioner Powell, would you like to share any more about it?
Sure, thank you. So I was just doing some quick research while we were trying to define that. And I really like what Seattle had to say about the definition. Support community-led strategies that lead to a reduction in criminal justice system involvement for communities of color. And within that framework, if you click on that document, you can see that they actually start talking about community service officers, similar to which we were just talking about with Rachel Otto from the mayor's office. I think this position of examining how a well-formulated document already established by another city could also help us here and formulate the definitions we want to make. But yes, after looking at that, and then I'm looking at the Police Foundation's definition of policing, and it's saying things such as departments identify themselves as engaged in community policing when implementing activities such as foot patrol, opening neighborhood offices, soliciting community feedback, and reporting efforts to the community, according to Skogan 2006. So I think within the legal framework, it's important for us to define that. That way, moving forward, people in future generations have more leeway to adapt to their generations or their time periods, equitable changes that may be pressing. But if we don't know what community engagement entails, I think that leaves it up to the establishment to act on that power, when in reverse, I think a lot of us want to see more community-led engagement in terms of like letting the community define how they want to be policed, or at least giving them more insight into the process on how that can happen.
Thank you. If I can make one comment, and maybe some of it is my fault in how I've described the conversation we had at the last full commission meeting was about the definition of community policing, which I think you've put up and described very well, Commissioner Powell. I do see as I think Larry described, a difference between a community policing model and what community engagement is. And that's kind of where I was going with this conversation. So I apologize, because I know we had kind of let off or fed off of the last one, which was a community policing conversation or definition of. But I guess maybe I skipped a step here, but my question was more about community engagement and what that looks like and what that feels like, separate from a definition or model of community policing, if any of that makes sense.
Thank you, Dante. That's what I was trying to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see you all later.
Thanks,
Thank-
Commissioner
thank
Shiflett,
you.
for coming. Other commissioners with thoughts on this topic? Commissioner Angelou?
I talk so much. I saw Lieutenant Suarez raise her hand, and I'll.
Go ahead, Commissioner Suarez.
Thanks, Steve. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and especially as a police officer for 25 years. Where I see engagement is when or how our officers interact with community members on a day-to-day basis, whether they're on a call or they're patrolling or they're having a coffee break or they're standing at a traffic accident. One of the, and I just reminded me the other day, it's probably been a couple months ago, I was walking my dog and passed a group of officers who were clearing up an accident. And there was no engagement. I walked right by them. There's no engagement from my perspective to them or them to me. And so sometimes I feel like as officers, we're so focused on what we're doing that we forget that, you know, someone in your city that you're patrolling is just walking by and a nice hello is an engagement. It's an acknowledgement of the community and building those relationships on that day-to-day basis to me is that engagement and also part of community policing.
I just want to acknowledge the significance of what Commissioner Suarez is saying, that there are so many opportunities for law enforcement officer to engage. In some ways different than a lot of other parts of municipal government, because you know we're more likely probably to encounter law enforcement officer than many other municipal employees, I would say. And so what I'm hearing Commissioner Suarez say is don't short shrift those opportunities that we could have for meaningful engagement. They're there. They're just sitting there. That's a very interesting idea. Thank you for raising it. Commissioner Angelou.
Marianne stole my idea. I remember walking to a meeting as a chief and going to a baseball game afterwards. So I had my son with me and I was in my uniform. He's away at college now, so he won't mind me telling the story. But I waved to everyone leaving a public building, and about half of them wouldn't make eye contact with me. She would give an uncomfortable nod. But if you would give a smile and a wave and say, hey, thanks, you know, thanks for what you do. And my son was just mortified. He said, why do you do that, Dad? And it's so embarrassing to be with you because you act like this, right? Yeah. And I said, son, if I don't, I'm in a uniform and I'm representing my department. And if I don't say hello, half the people I see will think that I'm a jerk. And they'll think, even though they're avoiding eye contact with me, if I don't go out of my way to do that, I'm going to give a bad reputation. Some don't want to talk to me, and that's okay. I respect that, but at least I'm making that effort to be proactive. Then there are those that do. And I think that because we're the professionals, because we're part of a very intimidating organization where our presence brings in body armor and weaponry, and in some ways we embrace that intimidation with and I hope this isn't hurtful to you, Dr. Prospero, but with that shaved head and with our glasses and our mustaches and the way we approach that, it's very intimidating and very off-putting. And if we don't go out of our way, that posturing, unfortunately, that over vest is so comfortable to put your arms in it, but it looks so arrogant, right? And it's part of the misunderstanding between community and law enforcement. As the professionals, we need to understand that we need to go out of our way to make that happen. And that's on the individual level, and it's as an institutional level too. So when we talk about community engagement, it's not enough to send out emails saying, hey, who wants to come to the police academy, or who wants to participate in this survey, or come on down to coffee with the cop. Because when I was supervising my COP unit back in the day, trying to decide how much tea to spill here, but the officers had a hard time engaging with the community because they just weren't sure how to do it. And they kept asking me, Chief, what do you want? I said, want you to keep trying. I want you to keep trying to engage because it can be difficult. And particularly when we're trying to solicit critical feedback from the community about the way they're not happy with what we're doing or the way we could do want better, because it's hard to tell somebody with authority over you that they're stinky, right? And it is an intimidating thing to do. So we need to keep trying, and we need to keep building the relationship, and we need to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper until we get some valuable information. And then we have to act on it and follow through and start to build that legitimacy as an organization to have that spin in a positive direction, right? So it's constant, and it's specific, and it's explicit. The other part of the conversation for today, since I have the floor, is how we as commissioners can better interact with the officers, right? And we had an interesting meeting in our subgroup, and the officer was sharing a position, and I really want to support the officers speaking out because we have to hear what they have to say. But illustrated to me how far apart we are with our concepts of where we are as a commission versus where they are as operators. And I just think we have to continue to try to break that down. And one suggestion I have is maybe small meetings where we have multiple officers with multiple commissioners. And I hesitate to ask that because I want to speak for BIPOC communities, but y'all are teaching everybody else the impact on your lives all the time, and it gets tiring teaching everybody else how to engage, right? So it's a big ask of me to ask you to continue to work with these officers, but I think it's worth it. And I think we can help, when they give a perspective, we can help say, this is our perspective as it relates to that, and this is why we need to come together, because we're just not on the same page. And unless or until we start to meet some common ground there, it's going to be hard for us to work together to have policy that we can put in place to help them do their jobs better, to serve more members of the community, because they honestly, most of them can't see why we're not connected. They're trying their best every day to serve the community, in some cases putting their lives on the line on hot calls, and feeling like I'm doing my best to serve the whole community, but not understanding that there's elements of the institution, there's elements of the system, and it may not be about them, but or unless or until we address that, we're not going to be able to overcome challenges that we have, right? And that comes from learning from each other. So my comments were a lot longer than Commissioner Suarez, maybe not better or effective, but
I don't need to give a subcommittee report now, Steve.
Commissioner
Oh, yes.
Well stated, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Reverend Davis. Go ahead.
Let me just echo some of the comments that Steve and Mary Ann have made. It is a two-way street. This engagement is not just the officers reaching out to the community, but it's the community also reaching out to them. And Steve mentioned speaking. That's a part of my heritage and culture, is speaking to everybody. And we ought to all make it our business to greet those people, although they have authority over us in some ways. But those are the people that we need to make sure that we include in that circle that we're greeting. So I think it's a two-way street. And whenever we talk about community engagement, we have to talk not just about what the officers need to do, but what the community needs to do as well.
I appreciate that very much, Reverend Davis. And I know from having talked to you in the past that that's something you take very seriously. I just want to circle back to the comments of Commissioner Angel-Werden and Suarez, Commissioners Angel-Werden and Suarez, because I think there are two very important points here to process. The first is that it is clear that community engagement in this domain of public life takes on both formal and informal costumes, if you will. In other words, There is the please, as Commissioner Andrew Weirden put it, please come to this meeting. You know, we're having a meeting. There's a flyer, there's a sign, there's, you know, et cetera. We want you to come. We want you to talk. That is a pillar, a leg of the stool. And then there's a critical leg of the stool that has to do with less formal, more routine, but nevertheless very important community interactions, which in this particular line of work may be in some respects as crucial as some of the other engagement that is more along the lines of, well, how should we do this job better? What do you think we should do differently? And so on. I though want to really come back to what Commissioner Andrew Weirden said about the need for dialogue with the officers that are associated with this commission, because this is something that, quite honestly, I think we as a facilitator team have been thinking about and wondering about for weeks and months. And from what I understand, and I don't want to be stating anything that's inaccurate, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, there has been some desire on the part of some commissioners or some subcommittees to orchestrate a listening session that would take place between commissioners and officers. Now, let me pause there, because some of what we just heard about was the potential for officers to share less if command staff was in the room, so to speak, the potential for officers to share less if they're being recorded, the potential for officers to share less if they feel like they're in a public meeting, which of course these commission meetings generally are. And so I'm using the phrase listening session very deliberately to say that maybe a beneficial step would be for a session to occur that was for a certain group of commissioners and officers to have a more frank and candid conversation that was not recorded, that was not conducted in the same fashion as we conduct these commission meetings, that was still reported on after the fact in terms of some lessons learned and some learnings, but that created a different atmosphere for that conversation to take place, regardless of whether it's a private listening session or a public dialogue. I just continue myself to see too many signs that something like this needs to occur in order for the commission to achieve all of its goals. And so I want to just offer that in response to what Commissioner Andrew Weirden said. I want to come back for just a moment to see if there are other comments from the commission around community engagement writ large, because I know we have other items on the agenda that we need to get to. And I want to just see if there's anyone who has points of view different than what we've heard that they wanted to make sure got into the mix.
I did want to bring in something that may be tied to some of our recommendations possibly. And this is when I was working with Marianne Suarez when she was the commander of the Metro Gang Unit, and I was on a ride along, and this gang detective, there's still full of them, but they pulled over eventually the offender, who's a white supremacist, and the officer, the detective, his background was Samoan, and he treated that offender with dignity and respect. Even as they are arrested, just confronting this person, even though this person is a white supremacist, he's a professional, he treated him with dignity and respect. And even when he's leading him out with cuffs, maybe a couple of jokes here and there, for me, I saw what a reduction of a crisis. The potential of something going bad, real bad, was way up there. And the temperament that detective had and the professionalism was not just, hey, the highs, and which I totally support, everyday highs, but also, hey, hi when I'm arresting you and things can go bad as well. I'm still going to treat you with dignity and respect. That's part of procedural justice. We treat everybody with dignity and respect because we're professionals, and that's best practice. That's going to really lead to some good outcomes. And that for me leads to the hiring process, right? If we hire individuals that have that temperament already, it is much easier to train for them to do community engagement, because that's the norm. We do that all the time. I'm Stevie Boy walking around saying hi to everybody, right? I do that all the time. I'm always trying to say hi to cops, and sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. They don't. And I'm also worried if I say like this, hey, if I'm driving, I'm doing this. I worry if they think I'm flipping them off. But I'm going to take that risk because that has happened in the past. So that's what this community engagement for me. It's important in all ways, but it also ties to the recruitment process. When we look at diversity should also be that temperament diversity. Hey, I'm an educator. Hey, I'm a social worker. I'm a coach. I've been working with kids all the time. I've been working with humans all the time. This is no problem. I could represent the law enforcement community in a very positive way day to day.
It's extremely helpful to have that kind of illustrative example, Commissioner Prospero, that we're talking about this beyond just conceptual in terms of a concrete illustration of what you're talking about. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward. And I do see the crossover significance to something like hiring, because, it's one thing to test folks for, proficiency in a variety of other domains, but if they can't come off as someone willing to work with a community, then that's probably a hard hurdle to overcome. Other comments related to this overarching kind of definitional piece of community engagement. What I will say I have heard in summary is that, number one, there seems to be an interest in having the commission put a definition forward. Number two, that it would be helpful to draw upon some examples that Commissioner Powell brought up from Seattle and some of the national examples that related to community policing. Number three, that we need to consider both the formal and informal ways in which community engagement manifests itself in terms of how we define it. And number four, that we should consider how engagement with the community fits into the recruitment of new officers and the hiring of those new officers.
I could just add to that last one, Larry, coaching, or part of the training, coaching.
Coaching.
How to engage. Is it, for some it's natural, some it's not, and they need some role modeling and they need some support on how to act.
Got it. So for our commissioners, is there anything in the way I just summarized things? Commissioner Benouri, did you want to add?
I did. I've been trying to add community engagement without having a framework for results has become an issue. There are many conversations that have happened, especially during this summer. And when we as organizers go back and ask our communities to engage one more time, there's a lot of question as to what end, why, and what exactly will be achieved out of this engagement. So that piece needs to be in the front when we ask communities to come back to the table.
I want to agree with that, despite needing to be neutral. I want to agree with that only because in the code of ethics in my profession, or the core values of it, one of them is articulating very clearly what impact the engagement will have when we're asking people to engage. So you certainly are in line with the way my field of practice thinks about things. So I will note that as well. Commissioner Prospero.
I support that wholeheartedly because they've been burned a lot in the past.
So any commissioners who haven't yet spoken on this topic have anything else that they wanted to make sure got included in the conversation? So I think this has been very robust and fruitful, and I would just say that before we close this topic for the evening, it would be helpful to me to see from commissioners how you feel about the idea of a listening session specifically between commissioners and officers. Now, there are a lot of different ways this could occur, including subcommittees, including in a full commission meeting like this, including in a private session. I don't necessarily know that we can make any firm commitments in terms of what can be done, but I would like to know if there is any particular will of the commission to go in a particular direction with that, if at all.
This is Darlene.
Commissioner McDonald.
I'm in support of that. I think that the conversation would be helpful and at least in having a dialogue and explaining or putting voice to a personal voice to what we, especially in the activist community, what we mean when we say XYZ, how we feel when certain things occur. Because I think that there's some distrust there, and there's some distrust there because we're not talking to each other. You know, we may be talking at each other, and usually after something occurs, and usually something bad.
Mhm.
So I'm in favor of it.
I too am in favor, and I think we have to weigh heavily whether the administration, the chiefs ought to be present or ought not to be present, and figure that part out as well.
I appreciate that, Reverend, and I appreciate Chief Doubt's, having some intuition on that front. So I think that's worth careful consideration.
Hi, this is Tanya.
Hey, Commissioner Hawkins.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
I just left a meeting where with CAB, where we were meeting with a few officers, and it was very enlightening. It was raw. It was great, and I think the full commission would understand more clearly what they do go through and how they feel. I think it's just very important that the full commission hears what officers say, and we can ask them anything. They're very open to meeting with us. They're very open to talking to us. And I think at this time, we need to take advantage of that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hawkins. And forgive me, you mentioned an organization, a meeting you just came from. Who was it with again?
The Salt Lake Police Department, CAB, the Community Advisory Board.
Got it.
So
yeah, I just didn't catch the acronym.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for that input. Is there any other commissioner that wants to offer their input on this?
Well, if I could clarify, Commissioner Hawkins, are you suggesting a full commission meeting on the record on camera, or less than a quorum so that it can be done off camera and not in an official manner?
The second one.
Okay.
Yes, their privacy is very important to me, and what they have to say is, it will surprise you. So yes,
I have
no point.
Go ahead, Commissioner McDonald.
In order for it to, so if you have an issue where most of the commissioners want to participate and to keep it under a quorum, would you have to have maybe two?
I was just about to say something along those very lines, because I think that it would be impossible for a commissioner to not have some interest, in hearing about this. But we do want to be mindful of some of these other considerations. I see our attorney, one of the attorneys, turn video on. It's helpful to have Mark's take on some of this.
Sure. The commission shouldn't be discouraged from attending events that aren't official meetings. And I'm hoping that anyone who might have more insight, Cindy Lou can correct me if I'm wrong here. If you're just listening in a meeting, you're not participating in some of the work that the commission does, you're not acting on things, you should be okay to attend a meeting. Certainly I could definitely vet that a little more carefully if that is something that you guys want to engage in so that we can lay down the rules, but that's my initial gut take on this right now.
That's kind of what I was thinking. If we're not making any decisions, voting on anything, we're not doing any specific commission business, I think we could, but yeah, I would love to have you, Mark, look into that a little bit better, because I don't want to run afoul of any of the Open Meetings Act. So,
happy to.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Yeah, that's I think top of mind for us as the team, and wanting to be both compliant and creating the best possible space for the conversation. Commissioner Angiordi.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to dovetail on Tanya's comments. It is important to hear what the officers have to say. I think it's at least equally important that the officers hear community members have to say and what their experiences are so they understand that impact. I think that's critical. And relative to Reverend Davis's thoughtful comment, I would like to have a conversation with upper command and line officers separately, because I think that I would like to hear those different perspectives. Mixing them, not so much, but I think there's value in all of it.
Thanks very much, Commissioner. With Commissioner's permission, I'm going to hand things back over to Dante to move through the rest of the agenda, just because of our desire to manage your time. But I want to thank you all sincerely for the robust conversation about engagement and the opportunity to potentially tee up a listening session, as we've just talked about. So rest assured, you'll be hearing follow-ups on that in the days to come. Dante, back to you.
Thank you, and thank you, commissioners, for that conversation. I think it's an important one, and clearly one that you all believe to be an important component of really helping to move this work forward through Salt Lake City police officers, just to share perspectives. And well, I'll just stop. I appreciate the conversation. I want to pause and see if there's anyone on the line for public comment.
There is not. Oh, I take it back. I do see Beverly Hawkins on our Zoom platform from the League. And Beverly, I don't know if you wanted to make any public comments.
No, thank you. Just want to say carry on with your good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins, for always being here. Much appreciated.
Yes.
Next up, just the subcommittee reports. So from the youth subcommittees, their report.
No report from the youth subcommittee at this time.
Thank you, sir. Policies, practice?
Yes, Commissioner Andrew didn't give half the report.
And I'd be happy to fill the time by restating it all if commissioners would like to hear that.
No, it was very good. And then the discussion we just had was a big part of our last subcommittee, and had very good dialogue with law enforcement and the commission. And it's something we wanted to discuss here on the call today. And so that was accomplished, and we appreciate that. Also, the subcommittee desired more detailed information on the chief equity officer, and that was provided and appreciated as well, and will be helpful in our discussions moving forward. Next week, we are going to talk more about the co-response program and community center, discussing point of crisis to when law enforcement shows up. And if I'm not mistaken, Lee Burnett from 911 will be there, and Jessica Waters and Chief Dowd and Chief Brown.
Thanks, sir.
If I could add one brief thing to that. I did send a resolution out to those that were in the policies and practices subcommittee to review. There were some definition and language usage that I know people had concerns about or ideas on. I think the most productive manner for me to move forward with everyone's individual annotations or revisions would be for you guys to annotate a document and to send me that document. That way I can get it back to the organization, the White Coats for Black Lives student organization at the University of Utah, that's actively going to be finalizing this document. But it's too much work for me to write down in a meeting everyone's concerns over such a long, important document. So if we can get those highlighted and sent to me by next policies and practices meeting, I can have those finalized for the 21st, which I think is our next meeting.
Thanks, Commissioner Powell. I apologize. I mistakenly assumed or maybe not mistakenly assumed that'd be a broader discussion. I think subcommittee was asked to review that, but we did have a very good, robust discussion around that and appreciate your efforts on that, Commissioner Powell. And I can send you the minutes from our meeting that summarize some of those points as well.
That'd be perfect. I know there were some other commissioners, such as Reverend Davis and a few others, that wanted to partake in a little more insight. So if there's another way too where I can schedule a meeting, that sounds like, if Mark's available, I'd like to ask, technically, if we're giving revisions to a document, does that need to be in quorum if another group is ultimately finalizing the submission to the city? Like, how many commission members would we need to be present at that meeting to offer recommendations on a community resolution?
So I'm sorry, Commissioner Powell, I just want to make certain I understand it correctly. You're talking about a document that you would make revisions on, and as the commission, as the Racial Equity Policing Commission, you would be proffering that as a statement from the body?
Yes.
And initially you were working on this in your subcommittee, is that right?
Yes. I'm currently networking with University of Utah graduate students that have worked on this resolution, and ultimately will finalize any last recommendations made. But they were very open to us reviewing and offering critical insight and recommendations as well. But I didn't want to cross any legal barriers there.
I mean, I guess if you are making a recommendation as a body as to what you want on this, then yeah, I think you would have to adhere to the rules regarding these types of meetings and a quorum if you're taking an action over which you guys have jurisdiction over, which would be recommendations of this type. So
might I also suggest, and tell me if this doesn't work, Mark, that the commission as a whole could allow the core commissioners to vote or vet the final document for moving forward. The subcommittees, at least training, is blessed the document in general, but not as it's specifically completed. So I'm just suggesting if the commissioners would be fine with the core commissioners being allowed to review and say, okay, is that an opportunity to then do less than a full quorum?
Well, I'm looking at the rules of the commission. I believe that the quorum is measured against the core commissioners, and I'll ask Cindy Lou to correct me if I'm wrong on that. Cindy Lou?
So the practice you guys have used is that if it's a recommendation from the full commission, that it's vetted in a full meeting. The editing of that content is not necessary to come to the meeting. Right. It's the passage of the final document. As far as the vetting of the core commissioners being the authority on behalf of the full commission, that's been kind of, as far as like the structure, they make the decision on what goes on the agenda, not necessarily what the full commission sends out, although the core commissioners do represent the commission through the media and in other engagement opportunities.
Right, just trying to figure out a way to be more timely, but certainly understand your description.
So Commissioner Powell, I hope we've answered your question, which as I understood was, can I do edits outside of a full commission meeting?
Yes.
Yes, you can, and you'd be encouraged to do so, just so that, because it is,
timely. Yeah.
So you may edit that, but prior to the decision of the recommendation, by the practices of this commission, you would need to bring it to the full body.
Perfect for approval. And can I ask when our next main commission meeting would be?
So your next meeting is April 21st.
Perfect. And when is the last date for city council recommendations for this? I think the time period, the chapter, I'm sorry.
No, I believe it's the end of June. Dante, I don't know if you guys have settled on a date of final recommendation.
We have not.
Okay, yeah, so I won't put a date to that currently. Commissioner Powell, I'll leave that to the discussion of the crew.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'll relay that to my my community members. Thank you.
Thank you. School safety, Siobhan?
Hello, all. I think that you've heard a lot from us recently. We presented our second set of recommendations to the council yesterday, and were well received. I know we've been hearing from a lot of community groups in our recent meetings. We expect to hear from a couple more that are focused more specifically, I believe, on communities of color and supporting children of color this coming week. If those folks can make it. Anything else that I'm forgetting about on where we're at as a subcommittee from my members? I think that's our report this week can be brief. Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Sean, do you know if the document has been uploaded into the folder yet, or could you send that to the REP so it gets uploaded so everybody can see it or be disseminated? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I will make sure that it gets disseminated with Cindy Lou. You have it from the council meeting, right? Do you mind including it in our next communication?
Yeah, it's actually posted on the website. We're happy to send a link out to the document. It's posted on both the council website as meeting material, and then it's also posted on the city's REP commission website. Okay. That has the recommendations, but we're happy to send out the link, of course.
Thank you.
Hey Dante, I have a question. So, we presented these recommendations to City Council. When are the recommendations provided to the mayor's office?
Same time.
At the same time? Okay, thank you. I was asked that and I had no idea how to answer that.
Yeah, same time. Cindy Lou?
No, I just wanted to share that the mayor makes a point to attend the work session. And so she was present during the conversation that you guys presented that.
Right, thank you. I see you pulled your hair out over that, so we wanted to make sure we got you the answer.
Hey, can I just say I did sit in on that presentation, and that was very professional and articulated the background behind the recommendations in a way I think that was tangible to the city council members, and I especially want to shout out to Rogelio, who did a great job talking about that peer cord. He acknowledged that he was a little nervous, but I think the message coming from him being a part of that and the passion, very powerful. So I wanted to make sure to acknowledge his work in particular. But great job.
Me too.
Subcommissioner.
Thank you. And just so you know, at the end of, well, whatever the end is of this particular term of the commission, as we put things together in the final report for council and for mayor, we will take what has been individually submitted to council and the mayor and package it with the totality of information around the commission, its approach, it's just all that has been occurring, so that it's a final holistic document of the work of the commission.
When are we going to talk about what happens after the end of June?
Right after I give the training committee subcommittee report. So training subcommittee met, and we did discuss the resolution Commissioner Powell was talking about, and as a whole, we're in support of that, with the understanding and expectation that there would still be some editing to the document. So we didn't want to wordsmith it. We just kind of blessed it as an overall philosophy of the resolution. We heard from Captain Mortkus, who's the head of the training division around the Civilian Academy, and some of the work going on within the academy. And we're still looking to get some more information around specifically some of the content and approach to the academy itself. We heard that the name would be changed. That was news to him, so we were glad to be able to provide him with information that he didn't know, which was that the Civilian Police Academy is going to change its name. We did do a lot of conversation around community engagement and kind of what that looks like, and then moved into the conversation around what might this look like after June. And all of our subcommittee members were very clear that they believe that the continuing facilitation of some sort needs to happen, that it was beneficial. But it might, however that might look, but believe that it still needed to be facilitated, that the structure as it is working. And the expectation that there will be a budget, again, to support the work of the commission. Have I missed anything, training committee members?
Nope, I think that's good.
Thanks, sir. Okay. Before I get to Commissioner Prospero's question, just as a reminder that the council work groups will be meeting again on April 13th and April 20th. And it's always an opportunity for commissioners to engage with the council, certainly as they're working on budget, certainly as now we're talking about the continuation of this commission in some form or fashion. It might be an opportunity just for even 5 minutes, just to make sure that they hear from you, separate from some recommendation. So if that is of interest, please let me know, and certainly let Allison know, who will be kind of facilitating that. But if that's of interest for some of the commission members to do that, we can certainly facilitate that, because the council has a standing time and agenda item for hearing from the commission itself. So to the question that Commissioner Prospero posed, thoughts on the continuation going forward. What do you see that looking like? What do you think the commission needs to continue this work? I could list a number of questions for you, but just in your own mind, how do you see this commission continuing after June, which would be the expiration of at least this contractual period with the Gemini Group and with Shalon and Josh and Larry? And so we'd just love to hear your thoughts on how you think that would look, or what support you would need, and what it might look like.
Are you asking that question to the commissioners?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I know I have shared my thoughts on this. I think I may have shared it in our subcommittee.
Yeah, you did, and I can give a summary, Darlene, or
Go for it. Go for it.
All right, I'll give a summary, Dante, and then let others fill in. But I think the main feeling was at the end to take a small period of time to do an assessment, a look back on the process and the phases, and reflect on implementation and the recommendations and what that looks like, but maintain dialogue. The subcommittee feels there's good dialogue and momentum going, and it will be important to assess how it's gone and do an after action review of that to move forward. Does that sound familiar, Commissioner McDonald?
Somewhat.
All right, you could add to it.
Straighten him out, straighten him out.
I think
you wanted to be done, right?
I did not say that. What I did say, however, was I was in favor of a brief hiatus to rest and allow time for the council and city leaders to do its work, to do what we requested, task, recommended for them to do, and to allow that opportunity. Otherwise, I think it doesn't promote trust in the work that we've done. And plus, it just gives us a moment to just breathe. So I was in favor of a brief hiatus, but coming back, my thought was maybe every 3 months to assess where we are. That was my thought. But others had thought more of a continuous engagement. And I was okay with that. But my thoughts was just a brief hiatus, just to go on a vacation, get away, whatever.
You're
and
right.
come
I'm
back.
sorry. That operative word I left out, hiatus, and that is very important too. Rest.
I love that word.
Commissioner Shiplet, who is no longer here, also mentioned how exhausting work is emotionally, in addition to keeping up with our responsibilities, and thought hiatus would be good as well. I hope I'm paraphrasing what she said accurately. Other commissioners that were there. I also think it's a time for reflection of commissioners about their ability to continue, because it is a lot of work to be on this commission, and it may be a time of natural turnover or rotation. So I think it's worth individuals reflecting on how they're doing with all of this, and see if there will be changes in rotations, etc. I think it's a good time for reflection and review over a number of issues. I think it's a good time to take a look at that. And that includes our charter, making sure that it's clear what we're supposed to do, and if we're accomplishing that. To dovetail on what Commissioner McConnell said, and make sure that we're doing the right thing with the city's expectations, and that we're empowered with the tools to be able to do that. So I don't know if we can reconfigure those expectations at that time too, because I think that it's value.
What I was thinking is that maybe we could take 3 months during the summer and assess what we have done, what recommendations we made, and what recommendations have been adopted or put into practice by the commission, the council, and the mayor. And then after that, maybe we could start up again, meaning September or October.
I know there was some talk about if the thought is that this is going to be a long-term, kind of a permanent thing, kind of like the Human Rights Commission, that to then slow the pace down. This weekly meeting is hard, and to just go more towards a monthly meeting, full commission with the working subcommittees working in between, so you don't burn out all the commission members. I mean, we may or may not have turnover, but we don't want them to go out so fast that we can't replace as well. So I know that long term, that was one of the thoughts. What I would like to know is what models are out there for something like this that we could maybe look at. Say, okay, yeah, this sounds great. No, this is too much or not enough. When it comes to a 3-month hiatus, my only concern is what the community will think about something like that. There will be still issues that are going on in the community. There will be, I'm sure there may be some problems that we will see out there and here. And so will that be seen as we're not responding to the community? So that is one of the things that I just worry about.
I agree.
But I do believe that I don't know if we can continue this pace. It's brutal. And I know my time has definitely been taken up a lot, but I think we got some good stuff started. We got a good foundation set up, and then from there, what does it look long term? And again, I would like to have some options to look at and figure that out. Again, I don't know about a hiatus or how long or anything like that, but that was just my concern.
Thank you.
I agree with Commissioner Prospero on the hiatus and the optics of taking a break like that. And I know on the school safety subcommittee side of things, we have a new superintendent coming on board. And I know he's, I think June is the soonest we'll be able to meet with him. I know that's something that's kind of high on our priority list, and taking a hiatus over the summer would be really kind of a waste of meeting time with him to to get some of our objectives rolling and create that relationship. I would like to see how other cities, other states hold structure commissions like this. I do want to see it go far into the future. I'm fine with the pace, but maybe it's because it's all been over Zoom, so I can just kind of click over from one Zoom meeting to the next and not have to drive anywhere. I know that was a big time constraint in the before times, was the drive time to get to various meetings. So it may be that I'm fine with it because I can just hit join meeting, not have to go anywhere, and then be home still at the same time. So, but yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
Hey, Nicole, and maybe what if, we would meet in person quarterly, but monthly we would do the Zoom. I mean, I think,
That's a good idea.
that driving around, I always had to, and that was kind of a pain, especially if I had to drive, a whole 5 minutes past where I'm at. Hey, man, that's hard, man. I'm not used to that stuff anymore. When I was in Houston, it was an hour. Here, 5-10 minutes is too far.
Oh my gosh. I have to agree with both of you. And the driving, it's killer.
And maybe one point for consideration too, no matter where you land, is the idea that with budget conversations going on right now, and with the mayor's consideration of how she's thinking of framing things and putting things together, as well as with the new position, that it might be wise, and staff, please tell me one way or the other, to put at least a general type of recommendation in with policies and practices that I know is coming up fairly soon, as opposed to wait till the middle of June to make this recommendation when things are far down the road or somewhat already baked. And so just that consideration of what type of general statement would you be willing to make around the continuation of this commission in the short term, as the next set of recommendations are going to go to council until later.
And that was the reason I asked you, Dante, because I'm seeing this, we got to figure something out. Either we end this or we continue or something. And my general recommendation is that we continue it. What does that format look like? I think we need to get some details on that. And also, I do think we need some kind of facilitator, because even with a facilitator, us community members are being sucked dry on our time, becoming very time poor. So facilitator, definitely continue. Details, I don't know. I would love to hear back from others.
I think we still need the facilitators. Yes, absolutely.
So do I. Sorry, I agree.
Josh, do you know if you'll be going to council before the 21st? Or do you expect to be going?
Yeah, I was thinking that either way, the 20th, sorry, I'm looking at the calendar, would probably be a good time to give an update on policies and practices. And that's on our agenda for our meeting on the 14th.
So maybe I missed. So your thought is to go to council on the 20th?
Like provided an update as we talked about earlier. Maybe I misunderstood your question. Are you saying, well, we have recommendations?
Yes, recommendations.
I want to, yes,
my question is because of this. If we go back to the subcommittees and formulate our thoughts and bring those thoughts to the meeting on the 21st, can we then take and we facilitate some general set of recommendations for the continuation? Is that too late to give to you to add to your recommendations that you'll take to council?
No, I don't think where we are now, I don't think that would impede us from making any recommendations or be necessary to make them.
Okay.
So would that put us making recommendations on the 27th? Because if we will consensus at the next meeting, then you have to come back before the full commission on the first, right?
The first 20.
And-
Right.
So-
Yeah.
I'm just going to interject here. The city council meeting does not, they do not meet on April 27th. Their meeting after the 20th will be on May 4th.
Oh,
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, Josh, if we have recommendations as a subcommittee next week, and the following week would be discussion with the full commission to be after that.
Yeah, you're right in terms of process. So the 20th would just be an update, an appearance, right? But yeah, you're right. Full commission would need to approve the recommendations.
Right. Okay. So just as a suggested kind of timeline for that, does that make sense? Does that sound workable, commissioners? That we go back to the subcommittees and we can then find within each subcommittee the thought on what a general recommendation would be it have a facilitator, be it we're going to meet once, whatever that might be, and then bring that back on the 21st, solidify that recommendation to give to policies and practices to submit when they make their recommendations to council and to the mayor.
I'm in favor of that. It sounds good to me.
Just to meet the earliest timeline as possible as budget conversations are happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have at least one agenda item for each subcommittee, which is have this conversation and come to some couple of sentences or so of recommendations for going forward. Okay,
With the
excellent.
word hiatus or without the word hiatus, that will.
We'll defer to Darlene on that. Okay. And just one final then comment. Larry, where's Larry? I don't see Larry. Larry. There he is. Just on the next group listening session.
Yeah, no, we've just talked a little bit internally about doing one additional, significant public televised listening session towards the end of your completion of recommendations, so as to share with the community what you are recommending and or thinking of recommending and get their input. And so we've held time on calendars for Wednesday, May 19th in the evening. So a very similar format to what we did on January 28th with, live telecast, simulcast in Spanish, call-ins, all that sort of stuff. But other format or specific questions that we'll ask is very TBD. But we'd ask that if you have any thoughts about whether or not you want to do such an event, you let us know. And that if you're supportive, that you hold the time. So again, Wednesday, May 19th, 6 p.m.
Thank you, sir. And I think that's our agenda. Any final thoughts, comments, anything everybody needs to know, commissioners?
I have something that is pressing on my mind. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. But I am a little bit concerned, and maybe I need to put this in an email, but I'm a little bit concerned about, so next week, potentially the murder trial of Derek Chauvin should rest. They're believing that the defense may rest this case next week. And I don't know when the verdict, of course, no one knows when the verdict is going to come down. But what is the process of if necessary, calling an emergency meeting, depending on what happens, if anything is to happen? Is there a process that we could have for a potential for an emergency meeting?
That's a great question, Commissioner. Thoughts?
Didn't we already talk about this at one time in the past?
We did, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
I thought we had a protocol.
I just don't remember where we landed.
Yeah, it wasn't it that we got a text? Yeah, maybe we should look at the notes.
So, yeah, I think we addressed that Commissioner
I was just
Prospero.
gonna say, Cindy Lucian.
Well, it was similar situation, but not a full commission meeting. So to hold an emergency commission meeting, it's necessary to do 24 hours unless we cannot do 24 hours. And if we cannot, then a majority of the commission needs to agree that, okay, we can do this. And then we hold the meeting and a majority attends. So there is a process, Commissioner McDonald, and I'm happy to email that process out of what would need to be in place for an emergency meeting to be called, but it can happen.
Thank you. I think that would be very helpful.
Anyone can, sorry, I want to clarify, Cynthia, you're going to send that out, I know, but any commissioner could initiate a request for one. I know there's a process that we'll need to go through, but it wouldn't have to come from us or city staff. It could come from commission saying, hey, this is happening, and yes, or who would be the initiator?
I think the initiator would be the commissioners, right? But the way that the leadership has been the core commissioners. So if a commissioner says, I'd like to hold an emergency meeting, my natural tendency would be to come to the core commissioners and say, okay, are we ready? Is this where we're going? But I will send a confirmed set of instructions on how that would go into place. Is that agreeable? I see nods. Okay. I will send that out. Thank you.
Another piece of the glue that holds us all together. Thank you. Okay.
Just one question. How those Zags doing? Just wondering.
What happened to Houston? I'm sorry.
There we go.
I was going for Baylor the whole time. I was going
Texas
for Baylor. I don't know what
teams.
you guys heard.
Whatever
It's
Houston.
a Texas team from the Republic of Texas. We all work together.
Tanya, can I just tell you, thank you so much for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Yes, and the Republic of Texas is its own statement. We'll just leave that alone right now.
I'm not gonna leave it.
All those goody
Somebody
two
say it.
shoot Zags. Oh, everybody loves the Zags. And la fregada with them.
Well,
That was my only question.
okay.
Dr. Prospero, I didn't see that on the agenda, so I need to ask you comments.
Yes, we'll strike that language from the notes. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.